Hey guys, we're in Tupelo, Mississippi today, and we're going to explore some of the sites that are intimately connected to the Tupelo Tornado of 1936. Come along with us. Let's go explore. Very few places around Tupelo are going to be more intimately connected with this tornado than right here at Gumtree Park. This tornado hit Tupelo on April the 5th, 1936 at 8:55 p.m. This tornado was part of a family of storms that began near Coffeyville, Mississippi in Yalobusha County. It moved through central Lee County, passing through residential areas in the northern part of Tupelo. More than 200 homes were just completely wiped away, and it didn't matter to this EF5 tornado whether that home was a big fancy home or just a little shack. Bulletin 31 was written by state geologist William Morse with the hope that it can contribute to better building techniques and safer cities. A lot of the information I'm giving to you today came from that bulletin. There was a partial collapse of Tupelo High School, and even though the wind from this storm was somewhere in between 250 and 300 miles an hour, Dr. Morse determined that the collapse of the high school happened because there were inadequate cross-partition braces. The area here in Gumtree Park was back in those days known as the Gum Pond area of the city. This area was one of the hardest hit areas by the storm. Gathering details of exactly what happened here has proven difficult. This was a largely African American area, and there were many smaller homes built around a lake that covered most of the area that is now Gumtree Park. During the tornado, most of these homes were swept into the water of the lake. Newspapers back in 1936 did not publish details of the African American deaths, so there's no real way to go back and find those details today. One newspaper does say that a settlement of black people did live in about 50 cabins on the shores of Gum Pond, just outside the city. The cabins were hurled house by house into the water with all the people inside. By the time this article was published, more than 25 bodies had been removed from the pond. An article written a couple days later estimated the dead here at Gum Pond to be more than 50 and feared that all the bodies would just never be found, so there's really just no way to get an exact death total from the Tupelo tornado of 36. We know this tornado killed at least 200 people, but when you add in the people who died from injuries received during the tornado in the next couple weeks, and the injured who were in hospitals in 3 different states, the death toll is probably up over 300. This storm system started in La Crosse, Arkansas, moved into Tennessee, and by the time it reached Mississippi, it was moving at over 50 miles an hour. After hitting Coffeyville, the storm created a tornado that hit Boonville and killed 4. The tornado struck Tupelo at 8:55 p.m., and its first victims were a couple and all 11 of their children. We'll pay our respects to their graves in just a minute. Google says there are 36 unmarked graves just right over there inside that tree line. Probably tornado victims. Hey, we're in Priceville Cemetery, and we're going to visit the grave of the J.P. Burra family. This was a grave that holds 13 people. The entire family was killed the night of the Tupelo tornado. I'm just going to read excerpts from a newspaper article talking about the Burra family funeral as we walk through the cemetery. The headline reads, 13 coffins in one grave as Tupelo dead are buried. They buried an entire family here today, 13 of them. Side by side in simple wooden coffins in a huge common grave, the 13 members of the J.P. Burra family were put away. Burra was found in the debris of his little frame house west of Tupelo, just south of the Willis Heights section worst hit by the cyclone. His body was carried to the courthouse, and there, 1 or 2 at a time, as they were found, were brought the other 12 members of the family, his wife and 11 children. His father and their family lived in South Tupelo and escaped the full fury of the blow, made arrangements for the funeral. The burial was simple. The 13 bare coffins were loaded onto 4 trucks at the funeral home and carried 6 miles to Priceville. There they were laid side by side in a huge hole 7 feet wide by about 30 feet long. The crude, unpainted wooden boxes were lowered slowly, and a simple burial service said. Then the first dirt from a large pile nearby was thrown in. In the space of a few hours, an entire family had been wiped out and buried. One bunch of bright red flowers was placed on the center box. Mourners sang "In the Sweet By and By" softly so as not to disturb another funeral some 100 yards away. Baptist minister H.G. West prayed. Briefly he eulogized, "Jim Burrow heard me preach the other night and wiped tears from his eyes. He loved the Lord." These people were something else. Out of respect for the funeral that was 100 or so yards away, they're burying 13 people, and they sang quietly at this funeral. The family members are James Green Burrow and his wife Jenny Bell Burrow, Inez, John, Carl, Thomas, and George Burrow, James Burrow, Minnie Vanciel Burrow, Dorothy, Doris, and Alan Earl Burrow. Boy, that's just sad. That tornado devastated this entire family. This one was harder to do than I expected. Okay, guys, well, that's pretty much the Tupelo tornado of 1936. But since we're so close, let's walk right over here and take a brief look at one more interesting grave. Especially since I need to end on a little bit lighter note, just a few feet away from the Burrow family, you find the Presley family. That first marker is Elvis's Aunt Oma that passed away a year or so before he was born. There's Susan Presley, and there's the grave of Noah Presley, Vernon's brother, and there's the marker for Jesse Garin Presley, Elvis's twin. Now, I honestly think he's buried in a little different spot, but we talk about that in another video. Well, I hope you've learned a thing or two about the destructive power of tornadoes, and maybe you've been reminded about how precious family and life really is. Thank you.